Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hi everyone and welcome to On the House, the Household Management Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Yastra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin.
Hello and welcome back to the LMSL podcast. There's something magical about stepping into a historic home, from the charm of original woodwork to the stories etched in every corner. But purchasing a home comes with a large set of considerations, let alone a historic home with potentially unexpected surprises. Think 100-year-old plumbing, for example. So in this episode, we'll be delving into what you need to consider when purchasing a home, and especially one with charming but aging features. And guiding us through this is Dr. Singh Darcy, who is the Senior Lecturer and Director of the Interior Architecture Program at the Faculty of Arts, Design and Architecture at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. A regular contributor to industry journals on residential as well as workplace design and hospitality, Singh's primary research interests involve historic Australian interiors, contemporary Australian interiors, and more. So we're incredibly fortunate to have him here with us to share his expertise today. So welcome to the show, Singh.
Thanks, Marie. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into this. I'm such a huge fan of historic homes. But before we begin, tell us a bit about your background and what sparked your interest in architecture, especially historical architecture.
I guess it was from the very first moment that I ever thought about architecture or being an architect. I sort of lived in a small industrial town south of Sydney until my parents up and moved us to Sydney in the early 80s and put me in a school that was associated with the cathedral in the city. And I'd never been inside a church or anything like that in my life until the first day of school. And I walked into the cathedral and looked around and I thought, wow, I want to design something like this. And so I think I must have been 8 years old. I just was obsessed with architecture, particularly like Gothic architecture and cathedrals. So it was like a natural evolution for me then to sort of put all my sights on training to be an architect, working as an architect, and now I've moved into academia so I can teach the next generations.
Wow, that's really nice to hear. It's very seldom that we hear of people just having this intense passion from since you're a young age. I mean, we hear that a lot, but that's the 20% of people compared to the 80%. But as for our topic for today, what do you think most prospective homeowners generally overlook when purchasing a home?
Sure. In relation to historic home, I would say one of the most important things and what people still overlook is the fact that they have to check the heritage listing of their property. That really is the first and foremost thing that you should do before, if you're even considering, start to look, because that's going to have huge implications in terms of your future with that home.
Yeah. So in just really briefly, what does that tell you about the site of the home?
So if a home is heritage listed, it comes with a number of constraints that are put on the home in terms of what you can do. It also may oblige you to do certain types of maintenance and renovation. And it also may oblige you to follow certain protocols in relation to colours, in relation to how the garden can be, in relation to how you might do any type of changes. So it's actually quite an important thing, as most historic homes do require some sort of maintenance and eventual renovation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And what about regular homes in general? What do you think people tend to overlook there?
I think people tend to overlook the ongoing running costs of a home. we need to take into consideration that homes are very expensive and that often limits people's choices. So they often just get what they can afford. But we need to think, well, once we own that home, or even if we move into a home for rental, how much is it going to cost us to run the air conditioning, to run the heating? Do we even need those types of things? So I think that's an important thing, is to think about the ongoing costs in winter and the ongoing costs in summer. And with energy prices going up and up and up, that's an important factor to consider.
Yeah, well, that serves as an excellent preface for our topic for today. But before we go further into detail, I would love to get to know you better. So this is Have You Met Sing? This is going to be a rapid fire icebreaker of sorts. So please try your best to answer within a few words if you can. So, book.
My favorite book is The Leopard by Giuseppe Tommaso di Lampedusa, which is also my favorite movie. So I'm going to answer 2 in 1. It was made into a movie a few years after it was published by Lucchini Visconti.
Wow, a 2-in-1 answer.
A 2-in-1 answer.
Yeah,
yes.
I think that might be a first on this podcast.
Well, yes, well, it's great. I recommend people go either watch the film or read the book. And there's even a Netflix remake of both. Which is different, but it's easily accessible now. It's on Netflix.
Amazing. And podcasts?
Podcasts, I would have to say Sleep Talk, which is done by Dr. David Cunningham. It's great for people who have sleeping issues. It takes you through all these different conversations around sleep, the culture of sleep, how to improve your sleep. So it's fascinating, but you can also improve your life through the podcasts.
Yes, that sounds really good. I love podcasts, or like any like newsletter, Substack, whatever, that covers every single facet of a certain topic. Like what's the drama, like what's the culture about this, but also what's the science.
Yeah, check it out, because that's exactly how the mix is done there.
Sounds really good. Role model?
I wouldn't say it's a person. I think it's a type of person that I look up to. And for me, it's people who are really generous with their time, with young people and with old people, and don't say no to them. So if a young person says, can I do this, or am I allowed to do that? I look up to people who say, sure, why not? Rather than closing doors. I think often we as people tend to we gatekeep and say, no, you're not allowed to touch that. No, you can't do that. Or I don't have time for you. But I think I really admire people who are really open and generous at the beginning of their lives and towards the end.
Yeah, that's a good way to think. And course?
I think the most memorable course I ever did was a traditional Spanish dance course that really challenged me and my feet and my body and my mind, but it was very fun, and it's something I'll never forget.
Wow.
I didn't expect it to be so difficult. It looked simple, but it was not. So I really admire people who can dance.
Yeah, for sure. And what is the most important lesson that you've learned from all of these?
I think it would be to challenge yourself to change. So it can be done. And I actually think you'll be more your true self, but a little bit different. And that's great. So challenge yourself to change.
Yeah, I love that sentiment. Yeah, just like, and learn new things, try things that you wouldn't have like a couple of years ago.
That's right.
Yeah, completely.
Challenge your attitudes, challenge your assumptions, and grow a little. Not a huge, you just grow little by little.
Yeah, you don't have to, I guess, refurbish yourself.
That's right.
Sorry, refurbish is on my mind because we're going to talk about refurbishing at some point, surely. Anyway, thank you for sharing more about yourself. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you a bit better. But now let's go into what to consider when purchasing a historic home. And for starters, how would you define household management?
I think this is a very interesting question, and I actually think it's something that we don't pay a lot of attention to. We often put a lot of attention to financial management, but the notion of household management is something really important because it's something we're all engaged with on a day-to-day basis. And I think that we can think about household management in the biggest sense in terms of the actual asset of the home, and how we sort of manage that, how we might procure it in terms of buying a home or renting a home. Then there's other things such as the long-term maintenance and upkeep of that, and all the things that are involved with that, both financial and organizational as well. So maintenance, repairs, etc. And then I would say household management goes into the subsets of what makes a home. So, for example, there might be things relating to eating, things relating to sleeping, things relating to ablutions, and then all the accessories that go with that, right down from buying a bed and bed sheets, then through perhaps to the actual ritual of those, of how we shower, and what we need to do to sort of make sure that that works for us, or how we go to sleep. I was talking about that sleep podcast, and sleep hygiene and environment is very important as well. So household management is really huge, but all of those things are interconnected, right down from buying the house that suits you to actually living in a way that is sort of sustainable and good for you and your well-being.
Yeah, 100%. And secondarily, how would you define housing?
Housing, well, I think that we could think about it in the broadest possible way, in a philosophical sense. So the German philosopher Heidegger talked about dwelling rather than housing, and he saw this as an inherently and uniquely human act. So we can think about housing and housing ourselves as a part of human philosophy because it's deeply embedded with us. We have to have shelter as an animal. We're one of the strangest animals that does require shelter, I think, because we don't have fur or a pelt or something like that. So it obliges us to create homes and dwelling. I think we can then think about it in terms of if we move away from philosophy into a policy sense around housing and the laws around housing and the government policies around housing. And that's a very big issue currently, not just in Australia, but in many places in the world where housing in itself is becoming a very hot topic politically. Yeah. We can then sort of move on to the smaller level, which is the actual dwelling itself, whether that's a house or an apartment in relation to that. So it's an important part of our lives, and it's an important part of our societies and culture. And then individually, it's an extremely important part that it provides us safety, but it also is a place where we form our own identities for ourselves and with our families. So housing is an extremely integral part of being human.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because housing is such an integral part of our lives, and yet we're not really taught these things from an early age, and we're kind of left in our adulthood to kind of just figure it out. But that's exactly what this podcast is for. So from your experience, what is the importance of understanding the considerations that come with purchasing a home in general, historic home or regular home?
I think we need to understand that the home, whether it's a house or an apartment, is actually the most expensive and major financial outlay that we will ever make. And even if you're renting, it's the largest recurring cost in your finances. So any decision in relation to that is perhaps the one we should be taking most seriously, far more serious than a car, far more serious than choosing which school to send your children to. That the home that you choose has and will have ongoing costs, even if you then decide to move to another home. So it should be very important. And I think it's really important we think about the appropriateness of the home that we choose. We often have an aspiration, and that aspiration is formed by media, it's formed by our friends, and we think, well, I would love this type of house, I'd really like to live here, I want this, I would really like that. We then have the cost aspect, which may limit that aspiration, but the aspiration still might not really be the best fit for you and your family. So we need to think about realistically, what is an appropriate home for me at this time, or for me and my family at that time, and what can I afford, clearly.
Yeah. And what are some of the common surprises that homeowners face after having purchased a home, whether it's because of an oversight or, yeah.
I would say that one of the things that people often don't really think about when they go and look at a home, a potential home that they're looking at, once again, whether it's to buy as their forever home or even as a rental, is because of the whole nature of inspecting a property. You might walk in, you've got different types of feelings. There are other people around at the same time. So we don't often look at homes with our true investigating eyes on. And one of the surprises I think that happens is that people don't think about the orientation of the home and the impact that will have on their comfort within the home and the ongoing costs. So it's really important when you're considering a home is go have a look at it. If possible, go have a look at it at different times of the day. That way you'll actually sort of see what is the sun like in the morning or what is the sun like in the evening, possibly what are the noise levels like as well. Because if you end up buying a home with poor orientation, you are destined to have more expensive running costs in that home. And that's something that you really want to avoid on top of the initial purchase costs, hefty air conditioning or heating costs because of the orientation.
Yeah. Oh, that's one that I never really thought of. I'm not sure why it's never really affected me. I think I end up getting a lot of apartments with very little sunlight, so I end up not having to use the aircon. So there's an advantage and disadvantage
Yes.
to that.
Well, you may have a higher heating bill in winter. So, yes, there
Yeah.
can be an advantage. I think what you're trying to look for is, given your price, what you can afford, try to find the house with the best orientation. And you can always find that by looking at the plan. Of all homes that are for sale will generally now come with a drawn plan, and it will have a north point arrow, and that will help you understand the orientation.
So apart from orientation, what else should homeowners research before purchasing a home?
I would always recommend getting the condition report from a building inspector. A lot of people think, oh, I don't need this, or it's fine, or we don't have time. If we don't put our deposit down now, we're going to miss out. But always having the building inspection report at least will find any major structural issues. The onus is really on you, the buyer, to ensure that you have that information there. And it's better to know the answers rather than to be sorry. Because
Yeah.
it'll be very expensive sorry.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned before that, going to all these inspections or viewings can be really tiring and stressful. So what advice do you have for making it as easy or like as approachable as possible as someone who probably has to go to multiple viewings in a short span of time?
I think keep your spirits up is that eventually you will see something that you will be at least okay with, if not 100% happy. I think the biggest issue there is really what your price range is and what that will allow you.
Yeah.
And that's something that really can't be changed. And so you'll just have to just keep on going, right? I'll find something eventually that meets my criteria.
Yeah, I do like to take like the little snack breaks or
Yes.
little coffee
The
breaks
coffee break, yes.
in between, like explore the neighborhood a little
Yes.
bit. That's always really fun. Go on a little walk and just see greenery
Yes.
if there's any around. But when it comes to historic homes, what are some of reasons that prospective homeowners may want to consider purchasing one?
This is a very interesting question. I think that you're either attracted to historic homes or you're not. In some ways, like vintage cars or other types of things. Is that I know lots of people who won't even consider ever living in a home that is not brand new and modern just because of all the conveniences and comfort. And I think that part of the reason people are attracted to historic homes is that they offer something that current homes don't have. So they literally do not build them like that anymore. So there's either an aesthetic reason. We like the aesthetic details, as you mentioned in your intro, such as trims or plaster or the overall architecture of the home. We might like the particular sentiment, let's say this nostalgia perhaps, that living in a historic home has. We may also like the way in which the architecture develops on the inside, so the way in which rooms are arranged that we don't find in contemporary homes.
Yeah, and what are some examples of how the rooms are arranged in historic homes as opposed to newer homes?
For example, if we think about homes from the beginning of the 20th century and the 19th century, they may have had the kitchen in different places. So, for example, the kitchen is separate from the living space. So you may actually have a kitchen, a dining room, and a living space. Some of the larger houses may have even had servants' quarters attached. You might find that the gardens might have a different relation to the home. And particularly the relationship between the inside and the outside of historic homes and modern homes are quite different because the nature of the window openings is very different. In modern homes, we tend to have large expanses of glass that mean that the connection between inside and outside is seamless, whilst in historic homes, the position of nature was different, and we often would like to separate it a bit more. So you get much more of a definite separation between inside and outside in historic homes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, what factors should prospective homeowners consider when purchasing an older home as opposed to a newer one?
Okay, I think as I mentioned at the beginning, the first thing that you really have to consider is if it's heritage listed. That's the first thing, because that will impact on what can and can't be done. So you need to be informed from the very beginning that you are going to enter into a home that has certain restrictions. It's not necessarily bad, but it's actually just good, that your home is going to be under local council regulations or state legislation. That's the first thing. Not all historic homes are heritage listed, and that's something that I need to clarify, but some are. So you just need to make sure that the one that you're thinking of buying is or isn't listed. Then I think another important thing to remember is that older homes, whilst often built well, were not built to contemporary standards in terms of thermal insulation, for better or for worse. So sometimes you may find that an older home may perform better in summer because it might be built out of double brick. It might have a veranda that shades itself quite well. So it's cool in summer, but it may not perform very well in winter. It might have drafts. It might not be insulated. The windows might not be insulated. And in climates such as Melbourne, that the winter is actually very important in terms of your energy costs and your comfort. Another thing to think about when buying an older home is that it may have an established garden that you might be one of the reasons that attracted you to that home initially. But then you also have to be prepared in terms of, well, you have an obligation in some ways to keep on maintaining that garden, whether that's yourself or whether you pay for somebody to do the gardening. So I think it's important not just to think about a historic home as the house per se, but it may have a garden attached to it that requires maintenance. And one other thing then to think about is that when it does come time to doing maintenance on your home, many of the items in the home that may attract you, such as the taps or the light fixtures or the details on the roof or the certain tiles, may not be available anymore. And so if they need to be repaired, the difficulty and the expense comes in finding a very rare product or a product that doesn't exist anymore. And even more complex could be the people who make it don't exist anymore, so that if you need to replace a certain part, might have to be custom made, and that might increase the cost. But that's part of the charm, and I think that that's something that you need to understand goes hand in hand. What is it that attracts you to the house initially is something special, but that special thing may cost slightly more to upkeep or to replace.
Yeah, that is definitely a struggle. I myself own a vintage film camera, and it attracted me initially because it had this beautiful kind of bokeh effect. It was I don't know actually what they call it. I think they colloquially call it swirly bokeh or something like that. It was beautiful, and apparently that is in the same I'm not sure, same line or collection as one of the Batman movies. I can't remember which one, but it just produced this beautiful effect, and I fell absolutely in love with it. But at some point, one of the parts fell out of the camera and I couldn't find it anymore because it was like this big, which is like a centimeter big and not like a millimeter thin. I couldn't find it anymore. And I looked high and low, scoured the internet, can't find anyone to replace it. So it's not even about like, sometimes it's really not about just, it will be more expensive, it'll be a little bit more difficult. Sometimes like it's just impossible to find that thing.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Some people love the challenge of that, and they may actually commission an artisan to make a special piece, which is wonderful because it continues those traditions. But they're sort of the more dedicated people, I would say. But yeah, I think the comparison is really accurate.
Yeah, you've really got to be prepared for these things because I really didn't think that far into it. When I initially purchased it, it looked like it was in perfect condition. But that's exactly what could happen as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In terms of structural issues or if the old fixtures in historic homes, what are some of the common issues that, may not be immediately apparent to the untrained eye?
Sure. One of the biggest issues, and this will affect all homes at some point in their lives, is the timber. Particularly if you have a timber frame house, if the whole house is timber frame, and there are many of those houses in Australia and all around the world, there will be issues with the timber roof structure. There may be issues with the timber floors, not just in the floorboards, but in the actual structure, such as the joists, the frames, and particularly depending on your climate, you may have issues with rot or termite damage. And these things aren't really visible on a 15-minute inspection to a home. So because the way older homes are typically built, there's no way of seeing those structures. So hence the building report with an expert will be able to give you that information, or at least an indication of that. If your house is built out of brick or stone or masonry, such as that, you can get disintegration of masonry elements due to moisture. So we often think that brick houses, nothing can happen to a brick house. But if it isn't really built correctly, and many of the old homes were not built to the best of standards as well, over 100 or so years, those bricks can basically just turn to dust because of the moisture that they absorb. So that's something also that can be typically hidden behind plaster or paint, particularly if you're looking at a house for sale, they might just paint over those things. So there may be loss of structural integrity. There may be water penetration through the roof, or there could be fissures or cracks in the walls as well that may have been painted over for inspection but might be there. All these things can be fixed, so it's not necessarily like the end of the life of the building, but they're typically structural issues that you just can't see with your eye in a quick inspection.
Right. And which of these structural issues and or architectural features tend to be more challenging to maintain or cause difficulties when renovating?
I would say it's the roof. It's always the roof because it's large. It covers the whole house. It's the point that really receives the beating of the rain. So the roof protects your house. So any rain that falls is going to fall on the roof. So there's more opportunities for water to get in. And so hence there's more opportunity there for rot, and there's more timber up there. So the termites can go up there and it's dark, etc. So the roof is generally your number one weak point. Then the other weak points would be perhaps where the walls meet the floor, if that's in a masonry building, because that's also where the moisture will come up. Generally, we have to understand that water is the number one enemy of buildings, whether it comes from the roof or whether it's absorbed through the bricks.
Yeah, you don't want to stay hydrated that way.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So in terms of maintenance and upkeep, how would you say that it typically differs between newer and older homes?
Mm-hmm. So with newer homes, tradespeople have common knowledge because they build those homes nowadays, so they know how they're built. All the materials and all the bits and pieces are available, so that there is no real specialised knowledge required in terms of new homes because they're just standard now. Newer homes are also designed with services in mind, so plumbing, pipes, wiring, etc. So access to those things tends to be considered more. So if something goes wrong in a pipe, it generally won't be buried deep within a wall as it may be in a historic home. So it's often easier to get to a problem in newer homes than in older homes. However, we do need to bear in mind that just because it's a new home doesn't mean it was necessarily built well, and that newer homes can often have more problems in terms of older homes, in terms of the quality of the build. And we've seen lots of that recently in all parts of Australia as well. So being new doesn't guarantee well built.
Yeah.
That's something that we actually need to remember. And one thing I always believe in is that if the home that you're looking at or the home that you're living in has stood for over 100 years, sometimes hundreds of years, it's a pretty good sign that whatever those problems are, somebody at some point in the life of the home has dealt with them. So if it's still standing after 100 years, it's pretty good. I think most people will be shocked that contemporary buildings aren't really designed to last more than 25 years. So you really need to think, well, okay, what stage of my new home, inverted commas, is the life of my home at?
Yeah. So when we're speaking about like more modern homes, what are the factors that go into, what makes it a good build or what makes it last? What are some of the things that we should be looking out for?
There is in Australia, we have the National Construction Code. We also have, as part of that, a whole sort of slew of Australian standards. And then we have the Master Builder Association. And the combination of those, in theory, should guarantee a well-built building that is built to standard and that is built to code. However, those codes don't necessarily talk about the long-term lifespan of the building. It's about, I'm building you a new home. It must meet those requirements. And if we go tick, 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 they meet those requirements so that it's ready to be handed over to you. But there's no necessarily guarantee within that in terms of the type of materials used and those sorts of things. There's not the expectation.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. So what do you think that prospective homeowners should do to ensure that the home that they're buying is built from good materials?
I think once again, you get your building report. Or you can, if you know a builder, bring them along and say, okay, have a look at it. I know it might seem excessive, but when you think like what I mentioned before at the beginning, that this is going to be the largest expense in your life ever, it could be worthwhile paying someone a couple of $100 to give you an opinion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so too. So speaking of money, how much money should prospective homeowners be prepared to set aside for maintaining a historic home, especially in comparison to a newer one?
Yes, so generally the recommended figures are between 1% and 4%. So I would say 1% if the house is relatively new and in good condition. If it's an older, and particularly if it's a historic home, I would be up into the 4% of the value, just to make sure that you can cover any of those expenses. Also, in general, what is really recommended is to have a 10% contingency savings, because you never know in these wild weathers whether like a storm might come, something might burst, something could break, and that might require more than your allocated 4% or 1% per annum. So having your emergency fund set aside for that, and if nothing happens, it can just keep on accruing money, etc. So it's good to have that buffer, and then your 4% per annum, I would recommend, and you'll be comfortably safe.
Yeah, those sound like good numbers to me. And one of the biggest ways in which that people can cut on their maintenance costs or just their operating costs, I guess, of the home, is through energy efficiency, which we've talked a little bit about before. It tends to be a huge concern with older homes, like you said, where there's poor natural ventilation and insulation, and ends up driving up overall costs because of the utility bills. And this is extremely common in Melbourne, particularly in suburbs like Brunswick or Fitzroy, where they have really, really old homes. And a lot of my friends and I, I've had firsthand, secondhand experience with this, where we go to the inspection, we fall in love with the old home because, wow, look at these nice wooden floorboards. They're real wood. They're hardwood flooring. It feels nice. Just everything's really weighty, unlike the newer ones sometimes. And it just feels good in the moment. And then you move in and you realize it gets freezing cold, and you can't survive a winter without going sick every single week. So what are the ways in which homeowners or renters can improve their energy efficiency in old homes without compromising their character?
Yes, it's a difficult question, and you're absolutely right that older homes tend to perform better. They have quite good cross ventilation, so because there were no mechanical means of extracting air or getting air through, they tend to be quite good in regards to having the air flow through. You needed that for houses that had gas, so you didn't suffocate to death. Or you needed to clear all the smoke out there. So what they don't do very well, as you said, is perform well in the cold. And that can be a big problem. So how can you improve those houses without really compromising the character of those? I would say one of the first ways is looking at insulating the ceiling and insulating the underfloor if possible. Sometimes the underfloor can be quite difficult in terms of access, but if you could actually get somebody there to crawl under there and put some type of sheet insulating under there, that will make a huge difference to reduce that draft that you feel in those old homes, because in winter, particularly next to your feet, that's where you'll feel it most. Another way that you can do it if you're the owner of the home is that you can look at replacing the windows. So you can upgrade your timber windows with new timber windows that have more energy efficient glazing is one way. And that can be done in such a way in which you wouldn't even know that those windows are new, but you'll get huge benefit in terms of the thermal insulation. You can look at trying to seal your doors better to make sure that you don't get drafts. It's also possible, I know it's not necessarily desirable, but sometimes you might consider changing the doors, putting new ones in with better seals is one way you could do that as well. Depending on where you are in the world and really the thermal necessity, you could even consider lining the walls so that you don't have the cold masonry facade within the space as well. That will normally help it. Sometimes in certain places in the world, they actually will require you to reline the walls to make the walls thermally perform better.
Yeah, I also recently heard about thermal curtains, which happened to be a thing. I didn't know about this until recently at all. Would those help?
Yes, so any curtain helps. So thermal curtains are great, but yes. So when we look at old homes, we people tend to think they're so stuffy with all those curtains and all that fabric. But the reason they had all that was to keep the windows that were very poorly insulated. The curtains would provide a way of sealing the cold air out of the room. So that's what the pelmet is for, is to stop the cold air coming in over the curtain. So the fussy design of old-fashioned curtains was actually for thermal reasons. But
wow, interesting.
Yeah, so curtains are a great way, particularly in winter.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And I'm now somehow, I don't know why, but I'm picturing like blinds in an old home and it looks so wrong, but also right. I can't explain it. It's like, because blinds are really effective for keeping sunlight out, especially like during summer. It's with our sun particularly, because our sun here in Australia is really, really how do I put this? just hot.
It's very hot.
It's
yes.
really hot. Yeah. You want to block out the sun, you don't feel as hot.
That's right.
Yeah. So
the best way is actually not even to have the sun hit the glass. So if you can have external shutters, that's even better. So that way you don't get the greenhouse effect. As soon as the sunlight passes through glass, its wave changes and basically the heat can't escape.
that is so smart. And so on the cosmetics end, what are some approachable ways to make homes look and feel fresher, both on the inside and the outside?
I guess my prime tip here would be just like a lick of paint. That's always the cheapest and best way to make anything look fresh, inside and out. Even if you can't afford to do the whole thing, you can just do some trims on the outside. If it's on the inside, you can even just do it as a room by room project. Nothing works better than new paint.
And in terms of historic homes where tradespeople are a little bit more skilled, not skilled, but more trained and well-versed in working with newer homes and layouts, what is your advice for locating contractors who are able to make improvements to the home without compromising their historic features or anything like that?
I think one way is that you can contact your council. So if you are, for example, having a conversation with your local heritage planner or heritage advisor in the council, they may typically have a list of recommended tradespeople. Another way that you could do is even just try some general Googling, heritage timber worker, and then you put in your area. And any tradesperson who has that specialisation will normally include it as part of their publicity and marketing, so you should be able to find that. Another way, if you're perhaps more social, is if you live in an area with historic homes, is you might ask some of your neighbours who they used if you were impressed with the work that was done there. It's a great way to meet your neighbours and find out about tradespeople.
Yeah, that's really smart. And for first-time buyers, or I suppose buyers in general, who aspire to own a historic home but have reservations about the maintenance demands, I was wondering, what are some historic features, historic features that can actually be put into newer homes?
In terms of, I would say, are you talking about the architectural elements here?
Yeah,
or?
architectural elements, yeah.
I think that's really up to the individual homeowner. If you are employing an architect or a designer, you might wish to have discussions there. A very simple way is that you might think about furniture is one way that's very accessible, and you don't really require any consultants in relation to that. You can go out there and find pieces yourself and try that yourself. And I think that if you're looking at incorporating other items, I think it's really up to you and the aesthetic that you're looking for. I think overall, if you're happy with it and it sort of works well within the overall conception of the house, have a go.
Yeah. And lastly, what is your advice for first-time buyers who aspire to own a home but have reservations about maintaining it?
Yeah, I would say that it's not necessarily something that is associated with historic homes. All homes require maintenance, and all homes should have a maintenance. As we talked about before, it might be 1% if it's a brand new home, or it might be a little bit more if it's an historic home. There's no one who would buy a car and not maintain it ever, because you know that it won't pass. And just because the government doesn't necessarily mandate that you have to have your rego renewed every year in your home doesn't mean you shouldn't maintain it. So I would say for people, don't be put off by the notion that you will have to do maintenance, because you will have to do maintenance on any home. So that's first and foremost. And as I mentioned before, that there's no guarantee that your new home will actually require less maintenance than an old home. The old home has stood the test of time. If the home has been looked after, and I think one of the important things to think about when we're talking about historic or older homes is that there's a difference between a home that has been continuously lived in and maintained. So that could be for 400 years, 100 years, or 50 years. The key is somebody has been living in it. And the mere fact of somebody living in it means it generally would be maintained and renovated to a livable standard. I think it becomes slightly different if first-time people or people are considering buying a home that hasn't been lived in, is derelict, that's more of a major project, and that will require a substantial renovation. And I would say that's a different whole kettle of fish than buying just an older home that has been lived in. So I think don't be put off by it. Be realistic is foremost and foremost. Then be prepared. So in terms of understanding that there will be ongoing maintenance costs, and you should be prepared to put aside that budget plus your emergency savings, and also have an understanding that there may be external limitations to what you can do, because your home, even if it's not heritage listed, there are many places, for example, in Sydney and Melbourne, that form part of heritage streetscapes. So your home in itself is not heritage listed, but how it is within the street is, and that may limit things such as the colours you can paint, the size of renovations that you could do. There are some places that may be on state heritage lists, and that may then affect what you can do even within the interior. And that's sometimes things that people don't realise, and they end up getting very upset when they realise they can't do the renovations they thought they could do because the interior is actually heritage listed as well.
Oh gosh,
Yes.
I would be really upset at myself for that.
Yes. Well, it does mean that, somebody will eventually buy it because somebody will like, those features, but you just don't want that surprise, do you?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I've already gone through all the trouble to go to the inspection, do the offer, like, get it accepted and move in, only to realize I can't renovate. Yeah.
It does
yeah.
happen. I've heard of that instance numerous times.
Wow. Okay, so this is a good cautionary tale not to do that. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us. I wouldn't have known about this otherwise, genuinely, so really appreciate that. And I doubt other people know about this either. So yeah, I think that was really valuable information, and I think it'll be a really good time to take a break with our break segment, Questions from the Internet. This is where I'll pose some burning questions from netizens to an expert, sitting right here, for their insight and advice. 3 questions will be asked. So my first question that I have here is, does anyone else feel like it's impossible to clean their old house? I live in an early 1800s farmhouse, and don't get me wrong, I love the charm, but it feels so grimy. No matter how much I scrub, I can't prevent or extract dirt from the cracks in my floors. What should I do?
Well, this is a very typical question. People go, "Oh, my old home feels so dusty. It feels so dirty." And I guess in relation to this, the person asking this question, I would have to ask them, is it still on a farm property? So any property on a farm is actually very difficult to keep the dirt out from the inside, because you're always inside, you're always coming outside, the dog's coming in, the kids are coming in. So there's naturally going to be dirt carried in. And then I would sort of say, ask yourself, is the dirt brought by foot traffic, or is the dirt brought by deficiencies in the building? So if the dirt is being brought in by foot traffic, you may think about rooms that isolate the dirt from the outside to the inside, such as a boot room, in which you might take off the shoes before you go inside, and that will remove a lot of the bringing of the dirt from the inside and outside. Another way that you could do it is through example, things such as porches and verandas gives you an opportunity to stomp the dirt off before you go inside. If you don't have the opportunity to change or build that, you could even think about putting some like a hard stand or hard paving immediately around the house, so that the grass and the other sorts of things don't hit hard to where the entry of the house is. So don't necessarily blame the house. It could actually be the way in which you sort of come in and out of the house, or the relationship of the house with the garden or the yard. If it is the house in itself, you might think about, as we mentioned earlier, putting some insulation underneath the floorboards to stop the dust blowing up through the floorboards. Because of convection, you'll often find that the wind will blow under the house, and if there's cracks in the floorboards, it may bring dirt in, and that way it could be grimy. So think about trying to seal any gaps you have in your floorboards. Think about putting some insulation under the floor to stop that happening as well. And then you may consider, like we mentioned before, resealing the windows so you have a better seal, so that also dust doesn't blow in there.
Yeah, and potentially take your shoes off
Potentially take your
at the
shoes
door.
off and keep the dog outside, I know.
Yeah, I actually like to wear house slippers at home because like it's virtually impossible to stop dust from accumulating. And I have a cat as well, and I shed quite a bit. That was necessary information, I feel like. And it's really impossible sometimes to, with a 9 to 5, just keep up with cleaning the floor every single day, and it is just it's bothersome to my feet.
And rural properties are even harder in terms of the dust.
Yeah. 100%. And next question we have here. What should I do with a 100-year-old house with sloped floors? I'm in contract to buy a house, and it has sloping and dipping floors due to settling pretty much throughout the home. Yet everyone is telling me this is normal. It's a 100-year-old charm and not to worry. But I feel like I'm being taken for a ride. Is this something I can fix?
So the answer to that is yes, it can be fixed. So you will find that most houses that are built on brick piles with timber floors settle over the time. It's just due to the nature of the way in which the brick pier is. It's sort of vertical, sitting on the ground, so there's going to be movement, particularly in an older home. I think the question you would want to know, though, is that movement recent or is it historic? So if it's historic, then that's okay. If it's recent, for example, are they building a metro underneath? And that's a different question once again. So you need to do a little bit more homework there. So I think to the response to this owner, you would need to go, well, maybe it's just the fact that over the life of the house, none of the previous owners could really be bothered to fix the piers to straighten the floor. So maybe it's now your time, that when you buy the house, to go, okay, it's my time to do that. I know I did that. I bought a home like that, and it had a wonky pier and the floor was sloping. And I was oohing and ahhing, but then I just got the builder to fix it. And then in the afternoon, it was all fixed. And that was the end, because I was the first person who could ever really be bothered to do that. So what I would recommend is that before you sign that contract, get a builder in and get a rough ballpark figure to say, hey, how much is it going to cost me to fix that, or to fix the floorboards? And that way you'll have a better idea. You can rush in and sign that contract and then get a really unpleasant surprise afterwards, or you can just do a little bit of homework before you jump into what could be a very expensive issue.
Yeah, really smart. And, in repairing that, you're creating a legacy right there. You're the first one to fix that.
And if you do decide to sell that house later, at least it won't be a problem. So you probably make more money on it than if you'd left it wonky.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Yeah.
And last question that we have here. How do I stay calm while managing maintenance issues in my old home? I purchased my first old home after years of owning a condominium, but now everywhere I look, I see potential trouble spots. They are most likely nothing, but I have my mind racing, such as hairline cracks in the basement floor, a rotting porch trim piece, and a large tree close to my sewer line. Everything in my mind screams money. What should I do?
Well, I don't know if this will be much compensation to the questionnaire, but everything about every house screams money. So it doesn't matter whether it's an old home or a new home, it's going to scream money. But once again, I think to reassure the questioner here is that the house has stood for over 100 years. So generally, it's a good sign. So that none of those issues that this person may be looking at are necessarily anything that should keep you up at night. It can't be that bad, can it? Because it stood the test of time. So what should you do? So one thing I would recommend doing is have a listen to that sleep podcast. It might help put your mind at ease. And if you watch The Leopard, you'll see really old houses from 400 years ago. So that'll make you think that you're living a piece of cake. But joking aside, what should you do? I would recommend, firstly, get some quotes. So if you believe that these issues are grave, okay, get a quote and see how much it is. And then once you get the quotes, I would say do a plan. So go around the house and say, okay, here's the hairline crack. Here is the issue of the floor. Here's the trim that is annoying me. Here is the tree. Plan with how much money you have according to your 1 or your 4%. You could dip into your 10% reserve if you think the tree is really about to be an issue, and you plan. And you go, if I can't afford it this year, what do I have to get done? What is the most important thing that might be structural? And then if it's not structural, go, okay, this year I will fix the hairline crack. Okay, done. Next year I will fix the trim. Okay, I will save a little bit extra money and remove the tree in 2 years, etc. And by having that plan, it means that firstly, everything on that plan will get actioned. Secondly, you actually have the money to finance those actions to make sure they get done. It's very easy to sit there and worry, oh, that cracked, oh, the tree, and not do anything about it, and you'll end up in a vicious cycle. So it's much better to actually budget and plan and actually do.
Yeah.
And then you'd be at peace of mind.
Yeah. And the way I think about it as well is that, you wanted to buy this home for a reason. And like, surely these issues, yes, it can put a dampener on it. But once you get it fixed, that is the home that you wanted to buy.
That's right. So I've recently I've been the questioner and I've been myself now. That even someone like with me, with all my years, when you get the keys to a historic home, you start to see all those cracks you didn't see in the inspection, and when you spend the nights there, you see even more cracks, and then etc. And it can become overwhelming. But then bit by bit, you make your action plan, you put your money aside, and then as you see it get fixed, you go, wow. Wasn't that, it's not so bad after all. I love this place.
Yeah, I imagine that the more you put into the home, not that I don't want to gaslight anyone there, because it definitely sounds like a huge headache. And I would personally also go into that thought spiral just like this questioner did. But the way I think about, I imagine that putting more into your home will allow you to kind of feel more fulfilled in your home, more emotional attachment to your home because you've worked on it here and there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think whatever, you might have those same thoughts if you're in a new home and a crack happens. I think that would be even more disconcerting if your house is brand new and you see a crack or other sorts of issues, the gutter's broken, etc. So, as I mentioned before, all homes have that obligation of maintenance, and it will come whether sooner or later. So everybody just be prepared, apportion your money, and do it regularly.
Yeah, that's good advice. So I think now's a good time to move on to the practices and habits debrief. And this is where we talk about the practical day-to-day application of what you've just shared with us. So my first question for you is, what habit would you recommend practicing when maintaining a home?
I think it follows on directly from that last question. And I would say that you need to have a plan, a project plan that is linked to a budget. Unless you happen to be swimming in money and you could just say, fix it all now, it's going to have to happen over a number of years. So I would just always recommend having your plan.
And how would you break that down into simple steps? What is the first thing that they should do? Make a list of things to maintain, or?
Yeah, I think that you would, if there's things that you see that you believe are a problem, I would note them down. And then when you speak to the relevant tradespeople, that you might ask them to say, is there anything else that you think might need to be done? as well, and they might expand that list or advise you to sort of maybe think, well, okay, this is a greater priority than the other. So it's in collaboration with the tradespeople, your builder, you might have an architect, you might have carpenter, etc., depending on the type of home. And if possible, try to sort of build a confidence with them. I know that it's actually very hard to find tradespeople, but as mentioned before, often these people are specialised, so there might not be so many of them about. So it's good if you're going to be living in this house for a long time to try to build some type of relationship with those tradespeople.
Yeah, and what are some struggles that people may face when trying to make a plan of all of the maintenance issues that need to be done, and like what kind of tradesperson should be best for the job and all these things?
I think fundamentally the main issue that would cause sort of problems here would be money. That it's all very well and good for me to sit here and say you should have 1 to 4% and you should have 10%, but it is actually very difficult. Once you've purchased your home, normally that's when you're sort of have the highest debt leverage at that time. So even that 1% can be difficult. So I think that is the issue that you can. It's all very well and good to have it planned out, but if those repairs start to come in and they're more than you expected, we've been living through a period of high inflation. There's been supply chain issues. It's been hard to get tradespeople. So they're the sorts of things that can sort of derail this practice. I think a little bit is the actual financial reality. We are dealing generally with large sums.
Yeah, and is there anything that we can do to care for our homes? Make sure that we keep them in the best shape possible. Anything like that we can do to prevent such maintenance issue further down the line?
Yeah, I think that there's some very, very simple things that we can do in terms of home maintenance, and that goes back to household management right at the beginning of our conversation. Things such as cleaning the gutters, that often they're things that you can do yourself. So make sure that the gutters are cleaned so that there's no water build up. Make sure that the downpipes are cleaned. Ensure that the drains also, that the water can come out. So the most important thing really is to get the water off that roof as quickly as possible into the drains so that none of it either runs down the facade. So I think it's important to remove any type of plant growth that might be growing anywhere around the eaves of the house or in between brickwork. You might want to sort of clean that. As I mentioned before, water and humidity generally is the enemy of buildings. So if you can try to keep those things that moisture attracting things away from your facade and your roof, the better. Try keeping the garden in order. I think that's also an important part. And then in terms of the inside, I really recommend regular cleaning is a very effective way of keeping the house in good order. Cables in their place, all those sorts of things that just help with general household management.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a few areas I suppose that I noticed. I completely overlooked this as well, and I noticed that some of my peers, friends do this too. Just anything that's like out of sight, we completely forget to clean. I forget to clean my study all the time, which I guess it's not technically out of sight. I'm using it all the time, but like apart from my 9 to 5, it's out of sight. I'm not in there, and completely forget. So sometimes dust builds up and everything like that.
Yeah.
So
I think that's an important point, is that for historic homes, people don't realise that they actually need to breathe. So because they're made from materials that have sort of like, they're made from bricks, which is sort of baked clay, they're made from timber, they might even be made out of stone or rammed earth. All those materials need to breathe and have to have air through them. So if the rooms are really jam-packed, the windows are closed and no air is coming through, you're actually inviting humidity in that will then invite termites or rot or other sorts of things. So I wasn't being facetious about keeping the house clean, but by keeping it sort of well organised and with air flowing through, you actually make the house breathe, which will allow for greater longevity.
Yeah, the ventilation. I heard that clutter is a huge attractor of dust as well.
Yes, yes.
So that's one factor, I suppose, of attracting humidity.
Yeah, I think it would need to be sort of pretty stacked up. Like you would need to have boxes and cupboards and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing all of that with us. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Very exciting conversation. Was really happy about that, and I learned so much from you. So that was greatly appreciated. Now, I would love to go into the open mic segment, and that is your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic. So the floor is entirely yours. Take it away, Sing.
I think, as I mentioned before, I'm very passionate about architecture and design. So I think it probably will be on this topic. I loved speaking about this. It's a real interest of mine. I'm sort of going through this experience now. I've had a few. I guess relating back to the initial question that Marie asked me is that perhaps some of my interest in this came from also when I was younger. My parents were, I would say, like a really early model flippers of houses that they would buy, old Victorian terraces and old houses, make the whole family live in them whilst they fix them up and then move them on. So as a child, I got to sort of see some quite dilapidated old houses that still are burnt into my memory. I remember that there was one, we went to an inspection of a terrace in Surrey Hills that the real estate made us sign disclaimers because the floors, it was basically a ruin. Termites had eaten through all the floors, and there was like holes in the floor. Sydney at that time was quite incredible just to sort of see all these remnants of the 19th century had made it into the 1980s.
Yeah, wow. So how has that experience shaped your view on architecture and design?
I really do have an affinity, I think, for older buildings as well. Even though I've practiced and designed modern buildings and other things, my interest really lies in older buildings. I don't know if it's if I was born with nostalgia or if it's a bug that you get from seeing them. But I think there's something about the solidity of the construction particularly I like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the top attractors to old architecture, historic
Yes.
architecture. Well, old architecture too. That's fine. But yeah, for sure. And what are some of the other reasons that you feel so compelled to historic architecture?
I think it's important that we maintain a connection with our predecessors. I teach a subject, a history subject, and I always say to my students that these buildings are not in the past. They may have been built in the past, but these buildings are with us today, and they form part of our contemporary life and part of our contemporary consciousness, and they make up part of who we are, even though they're a little bit older than what we are. But they're an important part of contemporary existence. So I think that we need to sort of, like our elders, we sort of need to respect them and give them some attention and some care to ensure that for other generations, they continue to be part of future generations' lives as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And do you have a fun fact about historical architecture that you could share?
Well, fun fact, I don't quite know what a fun fact. I have lots of facts, but
Or maybe a fact that you feel like more people should know.
No, I can't think of the top of my head of a fact.
Oh, that's all right. Well, thank you for being a good sport anyway.
You're more than welcome.
Yeah, I really appreciated it. If our listeners want to follow your work and connect with you, where should they go?
Sure. You can look me up if you go to the School of Built Environment's webpage and you just type in my name. You can find me there, and you can find my email address there, and I'm happy to contact with people. I love sharing knowledge and about buildings with the rest of the world. So
excellent. We'll leave those in the show notes so everyone can view them and visit them if you like. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to On the House, produced by the Household Management Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at hm.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Yastra. Thanks for tuning in.